3 days before my daughter-in-law's birthday, I walked into a bank and quietly erased my son's access to my money. No arguments, no warnings, no dramatic speech, just signatures and silence. Because for years, my son Connor had treated me less like a mother and more like an unlimited credit line. And when his wife texted me later that afternoon saying, "You embarrassed Connor at the dealership. You need to take responsibility." That's when I realized something that changed everything. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as the wallet. And the moment that the wallet closed, their entire world started falling apart. My name is Alina Vance, and for 63 years I've lived a life that most would call quiet, content even, here in our little town of Willow Creek, Ohio, nestled amongst gentle rolling hills and the familiar scent of damp earth after a spring rain. I'm a widow, a retired elementary school teacher, and my days are now filled with the comforting rhythms of tending my rose bushes, poring over well-loved books in my sunroom, and sharing stories with my small but cherished circle of friends at the local book club. There's a particular warmth that comes from seeing the seeds you plant grow, whether they're tiny petunia sprouts or the minds of eager young students learning their alphabet. I always found a deep satisfaction in nurturing, in watching things blossom with care and attention, a trait that I now realize has both been my greatest strength and for far too long my most significant weakness. My home, though modest, is my sanctuary, filled with memories and the quiet hum of a life well lived, a life I thought I had built on a foundation of respect and mutual affection, especially with my only son, Connor. But lately, that foundation has felt like it's been crumbling beneath my feet, eroded by a constant, insatiable demand that has nothing to do with love or affection and everything to do with money. Connor, bless his heart, is a charming man, handsome, with a quick wit, but he's always had a knack for spending money faster than he could earn it. He and his wife, Natalie, live what they call a modern life, full of expensive gadgets, designer clothes, and grand vacations that always seem to be just out of their financial reach. And that's where I come in, or rather, where I've always been expected to come in. Over the years, Connor had cultivated a habit of treating my bank account like his own personal vault, a bottomless well from which he could draw whenever he pleased. He'd start with something sweet, a phone call just to say hello or a thoughtful comment about my garden, then his voice would shift ever so slightly into reasons that sounded perfectly reasonable, perfectly urgent. "Just temporary, Mom," he'd say, or "just once, this one time, I promise," or the classic, most devastating of all, "Mom, help me a little please for me, for Natalie." And like any mother who loves her son, who wants to see him happy and successful, I listened, I agreed, I helped. That little help kept expanding, growing bigger and more demanding with each passing year, until I looked at my bank statements and realized I was funding a luxury lifestyle, an extravagant dream that I never chose for myself, a dream that was slowly but surely draining my own peace of mind and my carefully saved retirement. The worst part of it all wasn't just the money, though that was certainly a heavy burden, it was the attitude that came with it. Every single time I dared to ask about the money, or gently inquire when he might be able to pay me back, Connor would sigh, a long, drawn-out sound of annoyance that made me feel instantly small and foolish. It was as if I didn't understand the complexities of his adult life, as if my money was simply supposed to be ready and waiting, a standby resource for him to tap into at a moment's notice, to save face or to maintain an image. It felt like my sole purpose in his life, and in Natalie's, was to clear the road for his marriage, to ensure their comfort, to smooth over their financial missteps with my own hard-earned savings. I started to feel like a prop in their play, not a cherished mother. My own needs, my own hopes for a comfortable retirement, were entirely secondary if they were considered at all. I tried, in my quiet way, to suggest he might need to look for other solutions. I mentioned the roof on my house was getting old, and I worried about the cost of repairs. I talked about a sudden, unexpected bill for my car that had drained a significant portion of my monthly budget. I even tried to subtly hint that I was considering a small trip, something I'd always dreamed of, hoping he would understand that my funds weren't limitless. But my hints were met with disinterest, with a quick change of subject, or worse, with another request from him. "Mom, you don't understand how important this is for my image," he'd say, "how important this is for Natalie, for our family's reputation among her friends." He'd make me feel selfish for even thinking of my own needs. Natalie, too, would occasionally chime in, her comments subtly reinforcing Connor's narrative. "Alina, you've always been so supportive of Connor," she'd say, her voice dripping with an implied expectation, or "he really needs this, it would mean so much to him." I felt an immense pressure building inside me, a crushing weight of obligation and guilt. Sleepless nights became more frequent, my mind racing with worry about my dwindling savings, about the impossible choice between providing for my son and securing my own future. I even confided in my dearest friend Martha during one of our book club meetings. "Alina," she'd said, her voice firm but kind, "you're being walked all over, dear. It's time you put your foot down." Her words made me feel ashamed, ashamed that I had let it go on for so long, ashamed that I couldn't seem to say no to my own son. But my maternal instinct, that deep-seated need to protect and provide, was a powerful force, and I kept hoping he would change, that he would eventually see me, truly see me as a person, not just a resource. But the situation only grew worse. Connor became more entitled, the sweet talk less frequent, replaced by an expectation and almost aggressive assumption that I would simply pay. He started giving me deadlines, telling me exactly when he needed the money, as if he were instructing his bank teller. The lowest point came a few weeks ago when I was visiting their home, trying to connect with my grandchildren, and I overheard Connor talking to Natalie in the kitchen, their voices hushed but clear. He was discussing my finances, my retirement savings, as if they were already his, talking about how he could leverage my money for some new business venture, completely disregarding my careful planning, my entire future. Natalie simply nodded, adding her own suggestions. It was a cold, hard slap of reality. They saw me as a means to an end, a mere object, a source of endless funds, completely devoid of my own hopes, dreams, or even my own life. That realization, that profound betrayal, was like a knife twisting in my heart, but it also hardened something within me. I felt completely alone, unloved by them, but also, surprisingly, a flicker of defiance ignited. Then came the Audi. Natalie's 40th birthday was approaching, a milestone, and Connor decided it had to be celebrated in a spectacular fashion, a grand gesture that would make her proud in front of her friends. He talked about that luxury car like it was a trophy, a symbol of their success, a statement. And of course, he aimed straight at me. He didn't say it directly, not in so many words, but I heard it loud and clear in every conversation, in every knowing glance, in every casual mention of the dealership and the down payment. He wanted me to cover the hardest part, the significant chunk of money that would make this extravagant gift possible. This time, I didn't argue. I didn't hint at my own financial needs. I just acted. I made the appointment with my bank quietly, without a word to anyone. 3 days before Natalie's birthday, as Connor was still excitedly talking about the Audi, describing it in detail as if I were already writing the check, I walked into the bank, a familiar building that suddenly felt like a battlefield. My hands did not shake as I signed the papers, but my throat felt dry and raw, a testament to the years of silent struggle and buried resentment. I closed the account my son still treated as his own, the shared account that had been a gateway to his endless demands, and I removed his name from my card, cutting the ties with a final, deliberate stroke. When I walked out of that bank, the parking lot was still noisy, people rushing about with briefcases, living their normal morning lives as if everyone had just hit the drive-thru and jumped on the freeway. And I had just pressed the button on a habit that had lasted far too long, a habit that had threatened to consume me entirely. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was Connor, his voice panicked, breathless. He said the transfer wouldn't go through, that the dealership in the strip mall was holding the car, that the down payment had to be there tomorrow, or he would lose the deal, lose face. I hadn't even had a chance to answer, to formulate a response, when my phone buzzed with a new message, a text from Natalie. It hit me straight like a knife, cutting through any lingering doubt, any residual guilt. "You embarrassed Connor at the dealership," it read, cold and sharp. "You have to take responsibility." I stared at the screen, not because I was scared, not because I felt remorse, but because in that moment, with those words burning into my eyes, I suddenly realized they truly did not see me as a person, as a mother with feelings and needs of her own. They saw me as nothing more than a solution, an automatic provider. And when the solution stopped working, when I finally dared to reclaim what was mine, they blamed me instantly, demanded I take responsibility for their own choices, their own inability to live within their means. I set my phone down on the polished wood of my antique desk and wondered, if I reply right now, will I still be his mother, or just the spare wallet they expected to find in their purse? I didn't reply. I simply sat there, watching the sunlight filter through my window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air of my living room. A profound calm settled over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The immediate silence from their end after I didn't respond to Connor's panicked calls or Natalie's accusatory text was deafening, yet it was also incredibly liberating. The next day, I didn't hear from them either, not a call, not a text. It was as if I had vanished, ceased to exist once I no longer served their purpose. The silence was painful in a way, confirming my deepest fear that their love was conditional, tied to my purse strings, but it was also a cleansing fire, burning away the resentment and the guilt that had festered for so long. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a physical release of tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. The freedom to simply be, to think of my own needs and desires without the constant shadow of Connor's demands, was intoxicating. I began to look at my finances not as a resource to be guarded from him, but as an opportunity for myself. I finally called the roofing company and scheduled the repairs I had put off for years. I splurged on a new set of gardening tools, something I'd always wanted. I even started researching that small trip I had dreamed of, a quiet journey to explore the national parks out west, something for myself, something to nourish my own spirit. Over the next few months, there were a few more attempts from Connor, initially still tinged with anger and accusation, then later with a more desperate, pleading tone. He lost the Audi, of course, and the repercussions for his pride and their lifestyle were considerable. I heard through the Willow Creek grapevine, which always seems to know everything, that Natalie was quite upset and that their marriage was under strain. Connor had to take a less prestigious job to make ends meet, a stark contrast to the high-flying image he had cultivated. Each time my phone rang with his name, I would simply look at it, take a deep breath, and let it ring, letting the consequences of his choices be entirely his own. I didn't owe him an explanation or a further bailout. I owed myself peace. My life, once clouded by anxiety and resentment, began to blossom with genuine happiness. I rejoined a painting class I had abandoned years ago, rediscovered the joy of creating something purely for myself. My garden thrived, more vibrant than ever, a testament to the care I now had the energy to give it. One day, while browsing at the local community center, I saw a flyer for a project close to my heart: the creation of a new, accessible playground for the children of Willow Creek, a place where all children, regardless of ability, could play and laugh together. The project was struggling to raise enough funds. I looked at my savings, the money I had so carefully accumulated and so fearfully guarded, and realized I finally had the freedom and the desire to use it for something truly meaningful, something that would benefit the entire community, not just one demanding son. I made a substantial donation, enough to kickstart the project and ensure its completion, choosing to remain anonymous at first, not seeking credit, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was contributing to something beautiful. But in small towns like Willow Creek, anonymity is often short-lived. The local paper, the Willow Creek Gazette, eventually ran a story about the generous, anonymous donor who had made the playground possible. And because everyone knows everyone here, the truth eventually came out. Alina Vance, the retired teacher, had funded the new Willow Creek Dream Playground. The gratitude from the community was overwhelming, heartwarming. Parents stopped me in the grocery store to thank me. Children gave me drawings of the new swings and slides. I had found a new purpose, a new way to nurture, and this time the seeds I planted brought joy to many, not just heartache to me. Months later, a familiar number appeared on my phone screen. It was Connor. This time I answered. His voice was different, softer, tinged with a weariness I hadn't heard before. He didn't ask for money. He mentioned the playground, mentioned how he had heard about my contribution from a friend and how much it meant to the town, how proud he was. There was a long pause, then he spoke again, his voice cracking slightly. "Mom," he said, "I think I finally understand. I'm so sorry." It wasn't the full, sweeping apology I might have once yearned for, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall of entitlement he had built around himself. I listened, truly listened, without judgment, without immediate forgiveness, but with a quiet understanding. The consequences of my choice had been poetic indeed. He had lost his personal bank, but perhaps, just perhaps, he had begun to find his mother again, and I in turn had found myself not as a spare wallet, but as a leaner Vance, a woman who truly knew her worth and who had finally learned to plant her own garden, choosing where her generosity would truly blossom. The twist, perhaps, was that my revenge wasn't about his suffering, but about my own liberation and the unexpected blossoming of a new, more meaningful life. A life where the funds in my account and the love in my heart were finally truly my own.